This is Charlie Kao with TravelMole Media Group in Barcelona at the Airline Travel Payment Summit with Jennifer Watkins, who's with ARC, Airline Reporting Corporation, Director of Credit Card Services and Fraud Prevention. Oh, I bet you're loved.
We do our best.
Give us a little recap of what ARC does.
Okay. ARC is a technology and data company. We're a solutions company focused on providing products and services to the travel industry in the U.S. And so that's pretty general overview. So let me give you some more specifics. So we last year processed about $89 billion in transactions. About 90% of those are credit card, 10% are cash. So we still processed last year almost $9 billion in cash transactions, which is it's a lot of money to be processing in cash. We also have still, believe it or not, in the U.S., about 14,000 travel agencies. And so that includes online travel agencies, mom and pop agencies, TMCs, corporate travel departments, all variety of different types of travel agencies. We also have over 200 airline participants. So we provide services to those main constituents. Our main services we provide, we do accreditation of travel agencies. We manage the financial guarantees that come through travel agencies. And the key piece is the settlement. So we handle the settlement of the credit card transactions. We facilitate that by outputting the transactions to the carriers, processors of choice, or credit card company of choice. And for the cash, we actually distribute the money directly between the airlines' accounts and the travel agencies' accounts. So that's our main function.
And in your particular area that you look after, what credit card services, fraud prevention programs are currently being offered by ARC and on the planning for maybe in the future? So
we do have a fraud prevention team that identifies fraud, and so we get a lot of data. We have 36 months at least of airline-related data that comes through travel agents in the U.S. So we have a unique view of fraud prevention or fraud. So we try to look at that data and identify the fraud trends. We work with the travel agencies to identify fraud trends and ultimately try to work with law enforcement to stop the fraud. So we're in a unique position because the fraudsters could hit, 10 different agencies for $5,000 each, and that each one of those may not be compelling to law enforcement, but if we could put it all together and start to say, this is now a $50,000 fraud case, law enforcement's more willing to take that over and help us catch the bad guys. And we've had some really good successes in the last couple of years.
The kind of fraud, of course, you have people, I remember the old days, you would have humans going to travel agencies with bad credit cards and charging for travel. You had the situation where employees played games with credit cards or whoever.
Very true.
And of course today I presume the largest chunk of credit card fraud or fraud of any type are the online purchases.
That is true, although I was saying yesterday in a session, what's old is new again. And so we are seeing some of those old trends that we used to see coming back. The large online travel agents in the U.S. and the airlines have really got a good handle on their fraud prevention. They have providers that provide them with great tools, and when they can take all those tools together to build a fulsome fraud prevention initiative, they've been really successful. We do have these smaller mom and pop online agencies, I'm calling them mom and pop agencies, that are really focused on, I want to go online, I want to grow my business, but they haven't given a lot of thought to what that might mean from a fraud perspective. And so we're focused on trying to reach out to those agencies and say, how can we help you reduce your fraud? But to your point about what are we seeing, we do see a bit of online fraud. That is true. So there are agents that have gaps in their fraud prevention where the bad guys can go through. We're seeing loyalty fraud where the bad guys are hacking into or phishing for credentials to get into a loyalty program, and then they just book the tickets through the loyalty program. We're seeing what we're calling a corporate booking scheme, where maybe they phish for credentials of a corporate booking or corporate booker. So it's a corporation that an agency has a relationship with, and the bad guys get the credentials and they just start to book tickets as if they're the corporation. And they like to target those multinational corporations that maybe go to the West African countries and things like that. So there are locations that we really focus on where we're seeing the fraud really growing.
Of the 89 billion minus 10% cash, so we'll just call it even 80 billion. What is the size, roughly speaking, of fraud? I mean, 0.1%, 0.1%?
I mean, it's going to vary pretty widely by agency and by...
But as an industry, as ARC?
An industry. So unfortunately, I do not know. And so one of the things that ARC is focused on also is bringing agents and airlines together, connecting the industry. And part of that, we talked a little bit about the debit memo working group. So the debit memo working group is focused on reducing debit memos. But the first step of that was to try to get better data that will help us identify what you just asked, which is what percent of this is fraud? How many of these chargebacks are more services not rendered or maybe refund not received type chargebacks? So that group and that effort will help us get better data about what the actual fraud rate is. We do not have a really good handle on what that is.
Right. I suppose the credit card smart chip that USA, everybody, all the credit card issuers are now with the chip. Does that reduce fraud?
Not in our industry, and the reason for that is because all of the transactions, in essence, coming through ARC are card not present. So that chip that's in that card isn't going to help reduce fraud. Even if the card transactions were card present in the U.S., we have this challenge of infrastructure. So a terminal to read a chip is not generally available in a travel agent's office. So even if it is a card present transaction, that technology isn't available to fully support the transaction. But it's hard to put that infrastructure in place given that almost all the transactions are card not present anyway.
Right.
But it does put pressure on our industry as a card not present industry because the fraudsters, it's easier to target us.
Well, I hope next time we get together, there will be lots of news about new data that will become available to ARC and therefore the agency community.
Sounds great. Thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you.
Thank you, Jennifer, Director of Credit Card Services and Fraud Prevention at ARC.
Thank you.